Hey, I'm James with TVS Pro, and this video is on the all-new DJI Ronin-s. We wanted to wait about a month, maybe a month and a half before we did this video because we wanted to, one, play with it. We wanted to, two, look at a bunch of other videos and see where some things are missing, some instruction and things like that, and also give us a chance to figure out some quirks. We wanted to be able to call this an actual full instruction video. Now, I will say, if you're watching this video so that you can learn how to focus your lens with this wheel, then I'm sorry, but this video won't be any help. Whether you're using a Canon camera or maybe a Sony A7 series or some other entry levels, maybe Rebel or something like that, DJI has not yet made it compatible with this focus wheel. It does feel very nice to turn and rotate. It feels very good, but no, whether you're interfacing it with the IR cable that it comes with, which we'll get into, or through USB, I'm sorry, it is not going to control it. When you turn this on, you'll get a little red LED that is flashing. Hopefully that will be made available sooner than later. Time will tell. And I don't want to get into a whole lot of in the box. There's already enough instruction out there on that, but I will hit on one thing, and that is this little pouch, and we'll get into that. This has some of the nuts and bolts and other bells and whistles. There's a USB Type-C cable, a riser, a dovetail, and then you've got the main components, which consist of the tripod, the handle itself, which doubles as the battery, and hopefully they release some of those spare parts as well, and then the main gimbal. Talking about this handle, it charges with the USB Type-C cable in there from the front up here. It does take 2 to maybe 3 hours to give it a full charge. It does take a long time, but its spec is up to 12 hours. I had this on my desk literally all day. I haven't charged it yet for this video, and I'm at 75% still. I wasn't walking around with it at all, but it was powered on. There are 2 power buttons, and we'll get into that a little bit. But it is a remarkable battery as far as its life goes. So with that, we're gonna get started. It starts with the balance. I don't want to spend a whole lot of time on it, but I do want to mention a couple quirks. This isn't gonna be any different than any of the other Ronins that you've tried to balance as far as the order of how this balance goes. Just like the Ronin M or the MX, okay? First things first, and that is going to be on the tilt. There is a locking mechanism right here. If I release that, then push the pin here on the side, I will be able to pull that camera right out. So first thing you're going to want to do is adjust that forward and back motion of the tilt. I like to help people, so if I'm, and just in case I ski-wampus this too much, I'm going to undo this cable and unlock this, and now I can slide this forward. Before you begin, make sure that you prep the camera exactly how you're going to shoot with it. So if you're not going to use a lens hood or a lens cap, take those off. If you're not going to use a light on top or a shotgun mic like a Sennheiser Mickey 400, something like that, make sure to take those off or put those on. Rig it however it is that you're going to shoot with it before you start the balance, especially your battery. One, if your balance is there and you try to change out the battery, that may get in the way. So make sure your battery is in there, make sure your card is in there, rig it before you shoot it, okay? Or rig it before you balance it is, I guess, the better way to phrase that. The other tip that I might add is to make sure you've got, for example, the dovetail in the right place along the camera. Find the extremes is what I tell my customers. If I push this all the way forward, it should be lens heavy and want to fall. And if I let go of that, I'm supporting it here so it doesn't fall all the way. Yes, I can tell it wants to go forward on its lens. Well, if I go to the other extreme and push that back, yes, I can tell it wants to fall back. I know then that somewhere in between here is the happy medium. The Ronin M, MX, Ronin 2, all of those are exactly the same. That is one tip to help with balancing that is unilateral to all of those systems. So now that I know I have 2 extremes, I just need to find that middle, okay? And it's fine-tuning adjustments, and it is a lot easier when it's not properly balanced because typically this side will be down and it'll cradle it. it'll help it a lot more, because right now it's going to be a little bit trickier to do. That's pretty good, and I'll lock that in. It doesn't have to be perfect, just as long as it kind of stays in that spot. Once I have the tilt, it's going to be the side to side. Now there are two adjustments on the Ronin-s that will do side to side. One is adjusted here in the front, and you've got the ticks here, but the lock is in the back. So the lock is right here. If I loosen this, then it will allow me to adjust it side to side. But you're going to have limitations on this. So what I like to do, rather than adjusting this base first, I want to adjust this. That's the 2. Both of these control this roll balance. So I like to adjust this one first, and this is going to be your, call it the main roll balance, and then this one here is just your little fine tune to get that roll just perfect, because again, you've only got so much room, and it's going to vary depending on the camera that you're using, but on this example, 5D Mark IV, I've only got a little bit of space there. The other tip, you'll notice even if I loosen this, it's really not moving a whole lot, and you'll find that with all of these. They don't move easily. I kind of wish DJI fixed that a little bit better and added, I feel like if they had this knob here, that they could have added the knob that is on the Ronin 2 for fine tune to adjust it. Maybe on a Ronin-s Pro, I don't know, who knows. It is what it is. It's under $1,000 so how do you complain? But it doesn't, as I try to move this, it doesn't move very easy. You have to kind of cradle, remove some of the weight or the torque, if you will. And now that I've done that, I can slide this actually pretty darn easy. You're going to find that on a lot of these adjustments. You may have to cradle this a little bit to remove that torque or the weight, the pressure that is being caused on that adjustment before you can move it. So now that I'm moving this main one, I'm not going to get it perfect, but I am going to get it close, okay? I got to keep on going out this way, keep on going out away from me, a little bit more. That's pretty good. I'll tighten that down, and even though it's not staying perfectly flat and level, that's where this comes in. Now I'll go to this guy, loosen him, and I'll push it out just a little bit is what it was doing before, and I have to fix my tilt. Tighten that down. And there you go. So adjust this one here and then fine tune adjust the base, okay? Once you've got the roll, the next one, and this is actually probably what I would say is one of the most critical. A lot of people forget this vertical movement. Best way to do this, rather than loosen this, and even if I do, you'll notice again, it's not falling. It's not falling down. That's because again, you've got to lift it and remove some of that torque. But before you do that, rather than trying to adjust it up and down when you're fighting gravity, get the lens to look straight up. Now when you loosen this, and as another quick tip, this knob right here sometimes hits this little screw that is holding the cap of this motor on there. Just either tip it a little bit forward or a little bit past it, and that knob won't hit that anymore. Just a little quick tip for you. Now that I've got that vertical looking up, again, finding those extremes, it's staying upright. Then I know it's a pretty good balance, but to show you, I want to make sure that this is going to be able to balance. So if I push it that way, now it wants to fall down, okay, because it's bottom heavy. I'm working on this lateral movement of the center of gravity. Well, if I push it to the extreme the other way, now it wants to go that way. It's top heavy now. I've pushed that CG to the top. Well, now that I know those extremes, I know that there's a happy medium, so now I want to find that happy medium so that the camera or the lens is looking back up towards the sky, okay? So I'm gonna lock that in right there, and that should overall be a good balance. Looks pretty good. The next is going to be, and the last one, is the pan movement. Again, if I loosen this, I'm gonna have to relieve some of the pressure to move this back and forth. Easiest way to do this, to check your balance, well here, before I do that, I'll just lock this, and I'm just gonna tip it on one of these two tripod legs here. So if I go like that, it shouldn't rotate, meaning this way. If it rotated this way, well then I know it's back heavy and I need to slide it forward. If it rotated towards the lens, then I know it's front heavy and I need to move it aft. okay? This is a good balance, and I'll just show you what that looks like. So I'll loosen this, even if I just adjust it 5 notches, and now twist this forward. I'll help it here, there it goes. Now I know it needs to move forward because the weight is too far aft. So I'm gonna bring this back, adjust those 5 tick marks again, and I'm lifting, my hand is lifting this right here. You can feel a little bit of wiggle movement, because if I just, it moves a lot easier if I pick this up and push it at the same time, okay? Doesn't have to be perfect. There's my 5 ticks, we'll see. Tip it forward. It stopped. I kind of pushed it, and that'll work. And you can tell that my tilt is not perfect, and that's because, again, if I had started with this all the way down, it kind of cradles it, and it's better to adjust or find that proper tilt before you start. No, now I've really messed it up. There we go. Okay, perfect. And that is balancing. Now we're going to move on to actually powering it on and app navigation. Now there are 2 power buttons in this. One is at the base of the handle or the grip, and the other is on this side right here, just to the right of the joystick. One acts as like the master, and the other actually enables the motors to kick on. This has to be on this power button in order for the app to be navigated. So we're going to start with the master one first. Here. And with other DJI products, you've probably been used to press and hold. To power this on, it is not. It is just about a 1-second press and it's on. That's it. It's now enabled. And again, this, like this, their spec is 12 hours. I think that they're meaning with the motors activated and actually stabilizing. With this, all that's draining this big battery are these little LEDs, because if I go to the app and say connect to Ronin, it's not going to find the device. It's just not enabled yet. So once that's on, I am now going to, and I'll rotate this so you can see it. Here's my button here, and once I kick it on, you're gonna see these LEDs come on. And again, it's just a press and hold, and it will have those LEDs go in succession, and then obviously you can see how it kicks on. Now that I've got that on, it's now finding the Ronin-s, and I can select that. So if I touch that, and it will pull up green, got it, now I'm in the app, okay? Once you get it powered on, just like any of the other Ronins, if you are hearing some vibrations, that's not good for the motors. I would turn it off, check your balance, and try again. Once you power it on, and if you give it a little shake here or two, and you're not hearing or feeling any of those motors vibrating, well then you're probably pretty good. But the first thing I like to do is go into my configuration here. I'm gonna move this over here. I'm gonna go configuration, and it's in my settings, and my more tab, and there is a balance test. I like to do this just to check my balance. If you are familiar with the Ronin 2, it's going to do that very same thing where it's panning and tilting, and it's just finding out how much strain is going on these motors, roll, pan, and tilt, to see how bad or good my balance is. It takes about 20 seconds maybe. It doesn't go all the way around. Once it's done, it will say in this instance, excellent, 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 perfect. I can say okay. But that is not the only setting as far as balancing goes, because there are a lot of other adjustments, stiffness levels, power and strengths and filters and things like that, that we can adjust in here. So now that I know that my balance is okay, I'm gonna go back and go into configuration, and I'm going to go to motor parameters, okay? And just like any of the other apps with the Ronin, you've got an auto tune. I highly recommend doing this. So I'm gonna do this here, and you are going to hear, maybe if I get close enough, you can hear that. It's gonna do it 3 times. It's putting strain on the tilt, roll, and pan motors. Again, it's just checking stiffness levels. If your balance is excellent, then it's going to have mid kind of stiffness levels like in the 40s. Yeah, exactly. So pan 40, tilt 45, and roll 42. Now this, for me in particular, this is a little high for me as far as the tilt goes. With all the other Ronins, if you've got experience with it, the pan and the roll generally are about the same, within 5 units of each other. The tilt, I like a little bit lower. The reason why is because of all of the adjustments that you can make on the Ronin, everything is pretty well limited because of its physical body and size, except the lens. This has infinite amount of possibilities, so typically this tilt motor will go under the most strain. So I like it to have a little bit lower. All you have to do is touch that number, and I like to bring it down into the 20s and 30s. Now, they do have this slider, which makes it easy, but if you've got a thin finger and you can't really go to the edge all the way, I don't know how to get it further. So they've added these plus and minuses, really great. If I touch that minus, if I don't fat finger it, I did. Now I can, oh, guess what? I can't go any lower than 5. That's as low as it can go. Some of the other adjustments that you'll see us play with, I can go lower than that, but if I'm just pushing the plus, that allows you to move it 1 increment at a time, okay? So there's 30, I like that. Now, if I double tap my trigger, center it up just like an Osmo, I should be able to move this around and it not freak out at me. And it's not. I don't feel any vibrations, I don't hear any vibrations, and as you play with this, you'll feel that this is a solid piece of equipment. These motors, same generation and algorithms and whatever else that they've got in the Ronin 2, it is, in my opinion, one of the most solid gimbals out there. I'm really impressed with it. So if you want, you can select and go into this advanced setting, and if you are familiar with the MX or the Ronin 2, that is the same strength filter and controls. You can adjust those if you want to. With the Ronin-s, because I'm not dealing with larger, more complex systems, rails, follow focuses, and additional servos, matte boxes, and bigger cameras, I haven't really played with these on the Ronin-s. I haven't needed to. I've been using 5Ds and A7s, and it works great by just focusing on the stiffness levels, okay? And I will note that before you do the auto tune, you can select this mid icon here. That's what it defaults to. If you want it to be low key or low stiffness levels, you can adjust that, or high. You can do it that way. On the Ronin 2, it shows up as a percentage. You can do auto tunes at 40%, 50%, 60%, you know, 0 to 100 basically. This is the same thing, just a little dumber, simpler. Okay, so with that, that's motor parameters. I'm gonna go back out and go into smooth track. It takes a second for that to recognize, and when it does, you see I've enabled smooth track on the pan, on the tilt, and again, it takes a second just for it to recognize. And then the roll, I have not enabled that. Most people will probably not want that activated because they want it to be upright the whole time. You can adjust that if you want to just by simply toggling it, but I'm gonna leave it off. And I have added push tilt. So if I want to, if I push tilt, it'll stay, and I've done the same thing on pan. I've enabled it. I can push that pan and it stays. I can recenter that by double tapping the trigger, goes back to the middle. Now, speed, deadband, and sensitivity. Of these three, the most important one I feel is actually deadband. For example, and a better word for deadband for me is going to be tolerance. Do I want a high tolerance of movement or a low tolerance of movement? If I am walking around by hand, I want a low tolerance, meaning I need it to respond to very little movement. I want it to look left and right when I want it to. If I were on a galloping horse or a moving vehicle, an ATV, a boat, or something like that, then I would probably want a higher tolerance level of movement, which means now that I've got that on high, as I move this, there is a little, you're noticing that extra wiggle movement. Do you see that? I will respond eventually, but as far as walking around goes, if you are handheld, you are going to want a very low tolerance. That will give you the most response, okay, when you're walking around. Now, if you want things smoothed out and not moving so much, if you're just walking around, again, I'll use the example of a wedding videographer, then I may not want a high speed. I may want a low or a medium speed, and that's going to allow me to have some good, smooth, cinematic movements, okay? But if I were at the racetrack, getting race cars coming by real quick, then I'm gonna zoom, gonna want that a little bit faster, so I'm gonna go to a high speed, and if I want, I can go to customized, and now I can adjust this all the way up. We'll go to 80, and that is going to allow it to move a lot faster. Now, in the example that I gave with the race cars, if I want it really fast, what you're gonna wanna do, you're gonna wanna go to the M. Now, adjusting this is going to change 1, 2, and 3. And you'll notice if I go back out here, it says user 1. If I push the M, then it adjusts to 2. And over here, it is also giving me user 2. These are basically profiles. You can change it by touching that user, and I can go in between those users there. Or I can push the button here. Push it to 3, it goes to 3. Push it again, and it goes back to 1. These are your user profiles, okay? But if I push and hold this, then that light goes yellow, and it puts it into sport mode. Now, with my, if I go back into motor parameters, sorry, where were we? Smooth track. If I go back into smooth track, and I've got my pan at a high speed, low deadband, and medium sensitivity. I could increase that if I wanted to, but with my sport here, in that example again with the race cars, I'm going to get a really quick pan. It's really responsive that way, and when I let go, it goes back to kind of its medium. Seeing, because so here's another quick tip. I've got everything on this high speed, and I'm moving it very slow. As you move this around, you're gonna feel these jerks, okay? When you put it into a high speed or a high sensitivity, it wants movement. It doesn't want these low cinematic things. So just remember, if you're walking around, you know, shooting that bride-to-be and it's just jittery and whatever else, you've gotta remember to take your speed back down to a lower level, and now you're gonna get back to that smoother adjustments there, okay? That's smooth track. Let's go back out of that and into control settings. Now, it looks like a duplicate screen. You've got pan, tilt, and roll, and you've got some of the same adjustments. Deadband, max speed, and smoothing. That has nothing to do with your actual movement, but it actually has everything to do with the joystick, hence the control. So that's what you are adjusting. Deadband, again, do you want a low tolerance of movement or a high tolerance of movement? Max speed, again, do you want it to move quick or slow? I've got it on max speed, so it's moving really fast. If I want to, I can adjust that back down to low, and now it moves a lot slower, okay? Smoothing is basically the smoothing out of the acceleration. So if I have, or a better word for it would be ramp, okay? So if I have a low smoothing, it's not going to give, you saw that jitter? It's because it has a real abrupt start, right? It probably would work better with a high deadband. We're still getting a little bit of it. So if we increased our max speed, yeah, now it's just real abrupt, and you notice it stops abrupt too, and you kind of get that shake. So smoothing, I like to think of it as ramping. If I have a high smooth, well then I'm gonna lose those abrupt jitters. For me, this is a good thing because it's hard to get your thumb just right to just move it a teeny bit because you don't want an abrupt movement. So I like it to smooth it out for me. So if I go to a max speed of maybe medium, we'll go to a low deadband. So if I'm just going to start, yeah, that's, seeing it comes to a slow halt. At the same time, it's not an abrupt break, okay? Same thing with tilt and roll. Now, everybody talks about the 360 mode, but nobody really shows you how to do it. So if I pick this up and I go like this, I'm gonna double tap, just like an Osmo. If I hold this trigger down, it's going to lock my movement. So I hold it down and it's now locking this, right? Pan, tilt, roll, it's locked. Well, I have to put it into flashlight mode, so trigger down, put it in flashlight mode. Perfect. Now when I let go of the trigger, I have that same smooth tracking ability. It's doing it, tilt, roll. And now I want it to roll, that 360 roll movement. Well, guess what? It's controlling the pan. It's not doing it right. Well, what you've got to do, and put that down, double tap so it centers up, is go into channels. Now I've got my channel screen. You'll notice I reversed my tilt, I think a little bit more like a pilot. So when I push forward, I want it to go down. When I pull back, I want it to go up. So if I push forward or up, it goes down. When I push back, it goes up. It defaults to normal, but that's what I did. As I did that, you could see those adjustments move. Same thing with pan. As I move this and give it it's a little bit of a delay, plus we're going into Apple TV and AirPlaying it, so there could be a delay that way. Does it do it on here? It's still doing it on here. I have to change these. Channel 1 and channel 2, so this is the control that I want when I'm in my 360 mode, is that channel 3. So to change that, I'm going to touch pan and go to roll. That's what I want it to do. I want it to roll to get that 360 roll look. Now that I've changed that, I can go back out. Oh, I didn't want to do that. Just go over into motion. Perfect. Double tap, center it back up, bring it over here. Now I'm going to hold my trigger, lock it down, get into flashlight mode. Now, since I've changed that channel, it's now doing my roll. Perfect. Now I can get that kind of music video cinematic roll look. But let's say that this is too slow. Well, that's why we have the control settings here. I'm not going to adjust my pan, I'm going to adjust the roll. So I need to select roll, and I want my max speed to be higher. So I'm going to go low, and I can do medium, high, or a customize, and you've got that dial to switch. We'll go high. So now when I do it, it's really fast, wow, and it doesn't like it when you go that fast. So maybe that would be a bad setting. But there you go, there's another little quick tip. Let's straighten it out again. Perfect. Hold trigger, lock it down, and see what it does. There, I'm not going full speed, but that's fast. Oh, now I'm full speed. So it didn't like the abrupt, so maybe we'd have to adjust smoothing, maybe go high on my roll. Yeah, there you go. It didn't like that low. It was kind of freaking out. But now I could go real slow. Now it's like that time warp, light speed, make your audience dizzy effect, rather than the music video. Okay, there's that. Same thing on endpoints. This could be beneficial if you've got a longer lens, or you've got other things mounted, or a cage or something like that, and you didn't want it to look all the way up or look back. Or maybe, because we did have a red camera on this, maybe we didn't want it to look all the way up because the V-mount battery would hit this back piece right here. So then these endpoints, this one on the roll is going left and right. If I go to pan, then it's doing left and right as well this way. The roll was this way, and if I go to tilt, there's my endpoints this way. We had a red Gemini on this thing, for example. It's a little bit bulkier of a camera and really pushes the limits of this, but it worked, and it worked great. But I've got a V-mount battery on the back, and if I looked all the way up or down, that V-mount battery would hit this back piece. So in that moment, I may want to adjust my endpoint. Same thing as always, just touch them. You can touch anything that's blue pretty well, and adjust that so that that battery wouldn't hit that back piece. That's control settings. So the last thing, and we kind of already did that a little bit, was settings. If I go into here, because before I went to the More tab and did the balance test, you can do a system calibration. If you experience drifting, just like any of the other gimbals, then you can push system calibration, and it will hopefully restabilize and reteach it what is flat and level. If I go back into general, you're seeing another duplicate screen of the user profiles. And then the other mode is handheld. If you're going to be hanging outside of a car, maybe suction cup to the hood of a car, fast motion, galloping horses, whatever else, you can go into a car mount. And basically all it's doing is it's increasing the resistance to the wind that these motors will have. It's going to up all of those stiffness levels without manually having to adjust those. It just does it kind of like a user profile or whatnot. And in the original Ronin app, when you went down to the bottom and touched more, there was a motor pause button. If you turn it on, as I mentioned before, and you instantly get a bunch of vibrations, and you still want app availability or connectivity, rather than turning it off and adjusting those, I can touch my motor pause button and now these motors are paused. I am still powered on. I am still connected to everything, so I can adjust settings, go back to handheld, and you'll notice my symbol changed from car to handheld, but my motors are paused so I can readjust. Maybe I am swapping out a lens. Swap out the lens, but I didn't want to kill everything, so to speak. Adjust the lens, adjust my balance. Now when I'm ready to go, I can turn off that motor pause. It enables it and it's back on. That is configuration. Let's get into create. I was gonna point this way, but it's not that way. The way you're facing, it's this way. And before we get into all of these create modes, we have to actually interface with the camera. That's where this guy comes in, okay? So in here, and I've already got one of the cables out. The cable I've got out is the RSS camera control cable to mini USB, or micro USB rather, sorry. And the other cables that are in here are twofold. One is a type C RSS with type C, and the other is this bendable flexi IR. Now on the cameras, you're going to have an IR port or IR reader on, typically most of them are going to be on the handle. The A7 is exactly the same way. This is an A7R3, but there's your IR. I believe the Rebels are the same, and I think the A6500 is the same. Most of them are going to be hidden under your fingers. I'm not going to get into the actual control of the cameras. For this purpose, it's Ronin, but you do need to enable, in all of these cameras, there is most likely a menu that says remote camera control, something with a remote. You need to enable that, okay? And then there are other, I know in Canon, they'll have time lapse that you can turn on and off. You need to enable that. With Sony's camera, they don't have time lapse built in. Most of the time you have to purchase a third-party app like 10 bucks and enable that in order to enable some of these time-lapse functions over here. Canon allows us to, and I've got push on, so I'm going to rotate it over to, Canon allows us to go in USB. I can't do that on Sony. I have to use this IR. So I would plug it into here, bend it either under or over the top of the lens, and have this IR emitter aimed at the handle, so that when I push my record buttons and things on this handle, then it is going to send an IR signal into the camera, and it does it. If you can, and until DJI can fix this and 100% integrate with it, I would avoid this if at all possible. I mean, something's better than nothing, but in the test that we've done, it's not 100%. Maybe using a piece of tape or a wire, maybe strapping it to here so that it's not bouncing around, I don't know. But if you can, hardline is always better. So I'm going to, and there is an up and a down. The curved is on the top. Plug that in. We'll go into our USB port here. Now I've already gone into the menu and I have enabled remote control and I have enabled video time lapse. So now it should interface with it okay. So finally we're gonna kick this on, get my display working here. Another quick tip, I guess, man, I'm not supposed to, oh, I need to adjust that back. I want that back. We'll go into configuration, control settings, channels. I want to enable this back to pan, program that back to roll, and now I can rotate this back and forth. Double tap. I guess we won't get in, I wasn't going to get into it, but here's another quick tip. If you're using a Canon, you've got this little dial right here, let me rotate it back a little bit, that switches between video or stills. If you are wanting to do time lapse, this has to be swapped over to stills, just as a tip. But if it is on stills, the record button on the handle of the Ronin-s isn't going to work. It's not going to hit record. So you do have to toggle back and forth between those two, just as a tip for Canon, okay? Let's go back into Create. Double tap that forward. Now we're back into Capture. Capture is basically a virtual joystick. If I had this mounted on a jib or the hood of a car, say car mounted suction cup, whatever it is, this gives me a virtual joystick, as you're seeing on here, of the camera. I can move this around and it is going to adjust the camera. Really simple. And these are basically sensitivity levels or speeds, okay? So as I adjust these, so if I want it max speed on the pan, and I want to go like that, it's going to move really fast. But let's say I don't want it that high. I go like that, 7. Now it's going to move really slow. That's too slow. Tilt and roll, you can adjust those if you will. The roll, so you'll notice this is going to do tilt, this is going to do pan, this slider is your roll, okay? So those are those. If I go over to smoothing, as we talked about before, it just smooths that acceleration out and you can adjust all of those levels that way. That's create. It's essentially hitting record. So down here at the bottom, I've got record. And I'll make sure that my toggle is on record, and it is. So now when I hit record here, it gives me an indication, and with any luck I'm recording there, maybe? Is it? It is. It's working because it's interfacing with the cable. And then I can hit record, indicates there, and it should stop, and it stopped. Brilliant. That's capture. Panorama's next. As we're going to panorama, when I first started playing with this, it took me a little while to figure this out. Now, think of these squares as frames, and that makes a lot more sense. If I just want a thin skyline panorama, then I'm going to want to adjust these dots on just a single frame, a single line of that frame, okay? You'll notice I've got this green camera. That represents where the camera is actually facing. So if I move, oh, now I've adjusted this too slow. Go back into capture. We need to go back up to, I liked it at 50. Now we'll go back into panorama. Now it actually moves. You'll notice as I move this camera around, so does my little green camera. So this represents all of the movement that this has, okay? So now I need to adjust my actual panorama. Now it's set at APS-C. I need to adjust that because I am shooting with a full frame. But also on here is micro four thirds. If you're shooting with Panasonic GH series, you can go to a micro four thirds. As you do that, it adjusts this accordingly. You may not see it, but that's what it's doing. These frames represent or retrospect to that sensor size, okay? So now as I adjust, I'm going to go all the way up there and all the way down. Well, I can't go down any further, but I can go up a little bit. So we're gonna go about right there and right there, okay? And once you do that, as you're doing this, it's gonna find those points. As you touch these points, the camera is going to adjust to these, okay? I can select them. So if I selected that one, it's going to move because I just told it that's my starting point. But what if I don't want it to start there? I want it to start to the other one. So as I touch that dot, the camera is now going to move to that other side, okay? Now I can set my focal length of my camera, or my lens rather. I'm using a 24-70 L series, and I've got it at 24, so we'll leave it at 24. Now overlap is basically how much of each frame do you want it to overlap. The more you overlap on this, the smoother panorama you're going to end up, but the longer it's going to take to capture that, okay? It defaults to 30, you can increase that however you will. And then how long do you want it to stay put between frames? That's the delay, okay? So now that we've got it, if I, but I have to toggle this to picture, otherwise it won't do it. Now, because I've got this, it's going to say I need to do 4:1. If I go like this and go to 4:3, now I've got 4:3 and I've got 4 rows, okay? For our purposes, we're just going to stick with that 4:1. That's our start point. We'll hit that, and it's now going to think, and it's now going to go and snap the pictures. There's a shutter sound. Snap that. And it's moving a lot before the next picture because I didn't have a whole lot of overlay, okay? But that is panorama, and at any point I can touch this dot and it stops it. But I could go into play and I'd obviously see all those photos, drop them into my timeline or Photoshop or whatever it is, and I can stitch these together. Panorama. Time-lapse. Time-lapse is going to be pretty darn similar to what we just saw in panorama, except I'm going to set So I've selected, it's blue, so I've selected it. Now as I move this around, I'm moving that dot around. So there is Jake, the camera guy, and I've got this set that way. Perfect. My interval, how long in between each still do I want? And you'll notice as I adjust these, so this is right now going to take 60 photos and it's going to take 2 minutes to capture it. At the end of it, I'm going to have a total of a 2-second time lapse. If I want longer content, like my video, want it to be longer, say 10 seconds, and I'll slide this up to 10, and you'll notice as I do that, it's now going to take me 10 minutes to capture that. It could be slower if I take that interval down to 1, cut it in half. Math, right? And at 30 frames a second or whatever it is, now that I've got that, if I hit start, it's now going to do time lapse. Again, as a tip, that toggle of the stills versus video has to be on, at least with a Canon camera. I'm going to stop it. That's time lapse. Now onto motion time lapse. Same thing, only now I've got points, a starting and an end, and I can add points in there and make it go up and down. So first thing is I need to touch 1, and the camera's going to go to there, and now I can adjust where I want that point. So let's say I want it to start over there, and I'm going to go to point 2, and I want it to be a little bit lower, and now I want to add a point. Oops, I have to unselect, sorry, unselect 2. Now this is blue, and I can add a point, and we're gonna go over this way, and go up. There's my point, and then I can adjust those same things before, hit this, and it starts doing that over that duration of time that I have set. That's motion time lapse. Track. Track is very similar to motion time lapse, only instead of capturing stills, it's going to be doing points that you set, but video recording. So if I go into track, this interface is a little bit different than motion time lapse. Before you had to touch the number and then adjust the gimbal, and that is going to set your point. But on this one, I can more easily touch the point and adjust my finger around. And if I want to, I can add a point, and we'll put 3 right there. Now, you'll notice if I'm selected on 3, I have a duration option as well as 2, but not on 1, sorry, because this is NA. Duration means how long is it going to take to go from point 1 to point 2. The longer the duration, the slower the movement. The lower the duration, the quicker the movement, right? So if I go to 2, and I'm going to adjust this to 6 seconds, it's going to move really fast. And if I go to 3, now how fast or slow do I want it to go from 2 to 1? Well, I can adjust this all the way up to 1570 seconds plus. Stay time is going to say how long do I actually want it to stay on that point. So if I go to 1, I want it to stay here for 6 seconds. On 2, sure, 4 seconds. And on 3, we're going to have it stay for more seconds, okay? Now when I hit play, it's going to start on 1. So now that it's found 1, now it's going to go to point 2, and I can see its progress. And now it's going to go to 3. You'll notice none of this stuff had anything to do with hitting play. It's simply just showing you those endpoints, and you could use that by looking at your frame and saying, is that going to work? Perfect. When I've got it all set, I can hit record and it will start that process. That is all of the create functions in there. If we go back out, status is just going to show you status of the device, of what you have control over, as well as the 4-cell batteries that are in the Ronin-s. We've been operating for I don't know how many minutes. It was on my desk forever, and I still have 50% battery life. This battery is awesome. About is really simple. It's going to show you your login. It's going to show what devices and the passwords that you have set for it, as well as the firmware patterns. That is in the long and the short of it, probably longer because it's a full instruction video, the Ronin-s. Get creative with it. It's a lot of fun, and you will feel how stable this is. It is truly one of the best handheld gimbals on the market, and it will be fun when they can release the control for this focus and being able to control that with the cameras as well. As usual, if you've got any questions, feel free to leave those comments down there below, and we'll try to get those as quick as possible. Somewhere in throughout here is going to be a subscribe button. Please hit that. We enjoy making these videos for you, and we're one of the few out there on YouTube that actually sell and use these products that we do these instruction videos for. So these are for you guys, our customers. We appreciate your loyalty, and as usual, good luck and happy shooting.